Is scrunching the reason why your curls and waves are frizzy or don't hold? Today I'm doing a side-by-side split test where I styled my curls the exact same way on both sides, used the same products. The only thing I changed up was one side I scrunched my hair like I normally see people do in the common scrunching techniques that you often see, and then on the other side I didn't scrunch my hair. This is really isolating that one variable, which is scrunching. Can you tell which is which? And don't worry, I'm still gonna share some alternatives to still get your waves and curls to bounce up without causing frizz. My name is Gina and welcome back to my channel. Here we talk all things naturally curly. I love simplifying things and really helping you problem solve with your curls. I'm also a curl coach, and through my curl coaching programs, I help my clients identify which common curly hair techniques and methods are not right for their unique hair, and then which methods they should use based on their hair type and their goals. And through watching them style, I have identified so many tweaks that they can make that have made a big difference, which I'll be sharing with you here today. So let's get started. I'm starting off with clean, damp hair, and before styling, I'm taking my hair down from the hair repair towel, and I'm going to be misting it with some water to ensure it's evenly wet. Keeping your hair wet while styling is really important to prevent wet frizz from forming. Then I'm applying the Living Proof Leave-In Conditioning Spray as my heat protectant and to prep my hair. I like to do this by spraying some in my hands and then brushing it through to make sure it's evenly distributed. I'm not going to be using a curl cream or another leave-in today. I'm just using this leave-in conditioning spray because it is moisturizing, so it does serve as both a heat protectant and a leave-in. After brushing everything through, I just lift the hair off my scalp so that way I can easily section. For the next step, I'm going to section my hair off and apply gel. I am going to be splitting my hair down the middle for this routine, so that way we can do the even test, but I'm going to section as usual for even gel application. Today I went with one of my favorite gels, the Jessie Curl Spiralicious, because I know when I do my best application techniques, my frizz is controlled, and I really want to see the difference that scrunching makes. This gel provides a buildable hold, but I can usually get a strong hold out of it when using my strong hold method, which you can download the cheat sheet for that below. When I apply my gel, I usually just rake it in. Sometimes I do a little bit of the praying hands technique or finger coiling. Be sure to stick around because I'm going to share with you some of the most common scrunching mistakes and some alternatives that you can try. I'm going to be styling my hair like I normally would on both sides. I'm brush styling for even distribution and definition. I'm also doing a little bit of finger coiling. Sometimes I do scrunch each section as I go, but today I'm going to fully style my hair first and then scrunch at the end. That way we can actually assess the differences. Now that I'm done styling, it is time to scrunch, and I'm going to have to really focus and fight my usual muscle memory to not scrunch. For today's test, I'm only going to scrunch on one side of my head. On the right side, I'm scrunching the way I often see people do it. Quickly, lifting everything up without thinking too much about how the curls land, just cupping the hair and really going to town at scrunching. Now, some people definitely do scrunch a little bit slower, but if you're just scrunching your hair without really paying attention to how the curls are getting cupped in your hands, this can definitely lead to wonky curls and frizz. I'm being intentionally a little messy here because this is exactly what I see causing frizz for a lot of people, especially near the root area or the mid shaft or any areas that have a lot of short hairs, even very porous hair and damaged hair. For me, a lot of my higher porosity areas are on the end, so if I scrunch them like this, they're definitely going to frizz up. On the left side, I'm skipping scrunching entirely. I'm just leaving my curls how they are after brush styling and finger coiling and allowing the curl clumps to start to set on their own. To get a little bit of volume, I do like to shake out my roots gently by reaching underneath, and this also helps to break up the section lines because I don't want my hair to be stuck to my scalp, but typically in the way that I brush style and I style my hair, the hair is lifted off the root already. But if you feel like your hair is kind of stuck down, then that's definitely where you'll want to lift it off before you start diffusing. If you have waves or loose curls, or you really want the effect of scrunching it, but you don't want the frizz, there are some alternatives that you can try. If you have areas that have some breakage or short hairs or even some highly porous areas like your ends that tend to frizz up, you can just skip scrunching those areas entirely and just scrunch the rest of your head. So instead of scrunching everything by default, scrunch only where you need it. Some other alternatives to get the curls to bounce up without fully scrunching the hair is to gently shake the ends to break up the clumps or just to help the curls start to form, you'll notice that that movement helps them actually spiral. So this is great for those of you that tend to get very stretched out curls after you style. If your hair is not really bouncing up after you do something like praying hands, you might want to kind of move around and let your curls kind of swing. That way they start to bounce up. Another important thing to note though, if your hair is not bouncing up at all, it could be that it's damaged or that you need more protein in your routine or you need some bond repair, because hair that is weak and damaged doesn't bounce up as much. It's really lacking some of that elasticity. I recommend doing a good reset wash day routine where you clarify and use a protein deep conditioner and see if it's better. So these are some alternatives that I'm not necessarily using for this split test, but I did want to share some other methods that you can try. Scrunching itself isn't always bad, but most of the time when I see frizz happening, it's because of how someone is scrunching. So let's quickly cover some of the biggest mistakes that I notice when watching my client style and what to do instead. One of the biggest mistakes that I see is scrunching your hair too early before your product is fully smoothed in. You don't want to apply your products by just grabbing at your hair. Instead, apply your gel first by raking to smooth the hair down. Then you can use some praying hands for light tension and clumping before you scrunch. So the goal is to get the hair smoothed out to where the hairs are laying nice and even against each other and then scrunch, because scrunching is just going to set the hair how it is. So we don't want to be scrunching hairs that are all webbed and kind of crossing over and tangled. We want to scrunch and set the hair when it's smoothed out and clumped. Another mistake I see a lot, especially with beginners, is what I like to call the crab hands method. It's really hard to describe this, but it's basically just grabbing at the hair with your fingertips. I've seen this a lot at the mid shaft area or at the root or even on the ends, just as people are applying products or as they're styling. They're just kind of grabbing at the hair, which is just pulling out all of the frizz and shorter hairs, and it's just roughing up the hair. So instead, just like I mentioned before, you want to make sure that you smooth your hair out first and then you scrunch. And when you scrunch, you want to use your full palm to gently lift and support the curls from the ends, then scrunch up to the root. If you have layers in your hair, you can scrunch from the mid shaft and up, but just be cautious of how you are touching your hair. To get volume when you're scrunching, you can also gently lift the hair up with your other hand and then scrunch up to the root. It's also important to have plenty of slip and water on your hands and make sure your hair is fully wet. If not, your hair will stick to your hands and that will pull out a lot of frizz as well. Also, if people are doing this to try and get volume, there are other ways to get volume in your hair. One of the ways is to kind of reach your hand from underneath and lift the hair away from the scalp, then scrunch. So I do a lot of lifting the hair away and then taming frizz and lifting the hair away until I get it just right, because if you just kind of grab at the hair, it's definitely going to cause frizz. Another common mistake is scrunching too close to the root or at mid shaft, especially in frizz prone areas. This is similar to what I mentioned before, but anytime you are going in at your hair in the middle and lifting up, it can definitely cause frizz. And this especially happens for those of us that have a lot of short hairs, maybe from recent regrowth or any breakage in the hair. This is just making it pop out. So instead, you want everything to be nice and smooth down and then go in and scrunch. You want to focus your scrunching on the mid lengths and ends and avoid scrunching near the root if that's where you tend to get a lot of frizz. And again, you can use your other hand to pinch the hair at the root so that way it's lifted away from the scalp and then scrunch. And another great way to get volume at the root is to lean pretty far to the side so that way you can fully scrunch all the way up. The goal is to keep the hair lifted away from the scalp if possible. And finally, I often see people just rushing or pulsing too aggressively. If you're scrunching very quickly, there's no way that you can see how your hair is getting scrunched. It's just happening too quickly, so you're probably not even noticing that the hair is getting wonky and misshaped or a lot of frizz is forming. Plus, it's not good on our hair. We want to treat our hair like it is fragile, because it definitely is, especially if your hair is damaged. So instead, pulse slowly and gently and be mindful of how the hair is getting gathered into your palms as you scrunch up. You can still pulse at the top, but just keep it very slow and move slowly as you go around your head and scrunch. But let's get back into the styling routine, comparing scrunching versus not scrunching at all. Next step is to microplop and add extra gel. So you can skip this step, but I typically do this to help speed up my dry time and increase my hold. But there is a right and a wrong way to do it. And this can especially cause frizz because your hair is starting to dry, and anytime your hair is starting to dry, it's definitely going to frizz up. So scrunching your hair haphazardly with your towel in sort of the same way that you do with the regular scrunching is definitely going to cause frizz if you're not paying close attention. I feel like that's really the theme here, is just paying more attention is going to really pay off, and just looking at your hair closely. It doesn't mean you have to spend a ton of time doing your hair, but just being aware of how your hair is getting scrunched. So instead, an alternative method that you can try if you still want to microplop is to gently squeeze your hair around the mid shaft or even at the ends or at the root with your towel. Just be very careful to not rough up the hair's cuticle. I'm more so pushing into the hair instead of straight up and really pulsing a ton, because that sort of rubbing, that friction is what is causing frizz. So we really want to minimize friction. This is another reason I really like the hair repair towels, because it's smooth cotton. It feels like a t-shirt, so it doesn't create any friction in the hair like a regular microfiber can that has those tiny little fibers in it. You can also pinch your root again and lift. That way you can get a little bit more root lift and volume. So I always add extra gel after I finish microplopping to help increase my hold and tame any frizzy areas. If you're having to do a ton of taming at this step, then it could be because of the previous mistakes. But the improper way to do this would be to scrunch your hair with your gel, just like you've been scrunching. This is causing a ton of frizz to pop out. This probably is causing the most frizz out of any of the steps that I've discussed, and that is because the hair is starting to dry, and also my hands are a little bit sticky. If your palms feel sticky when you're doing this step and you're going in and grabbing at your hair mid-shaft, it's definitely pulling small hairs out and leading to a lot of frizz. Ideally, you don't want to mess up the styling that you just did. So a better method would be to gently glaze the gel over. But first, you need to apply some water to your gel if your palms are feeling sticky. So when I add this water to my gel, I have this smooth, slippery feeling on my hands. So that way when I touch my wet hair, it's not sticking and grabbing and pulling out frizz. So I like to focus on glazing, which is just where you're sort of putting a second coat on the surface of your hair. Sometimes I also do praying hands if I'm seeing some frizz form or if I'm getting some stubborn stringy areas. This is restyling a little bit, but not restyling my entire head. It's just helping to touch up some problem areas. For me, that's usually the front section. But I'm not going in and raking. I'm also not scrunching here. You can kind of bounce the hair up a little bit if you want to encourage some curl formation, but the glazing method is really going to be key here in praying hands. I'm not going back in and doing a bunch of scrunching. I'm just keeping it as is. That way the hair stays more tamed and all that frizz is not popping out. So look at the difference in my hair. You can see so much more frizz on the side that I did a bunch of scrunching and the improper techniques compared to the side that I did not scrunch at all. I styled them both the same way. I used brush styling and finger coiling techniques on both sides, but it was really the scrunching that ruined all of that work that I did with styling, and it really prolonged my wash day routine because I was having to try and fix it, going back in and doing more styling and then scrunching again. It just ruins a lot of the work that you just did. So at this stage, if you are seeing a lot of wet frizz, it could be due to your scrunching. Let's go ahead and get into diffusing, and there's a couple more tips when it comes to diffusing in the right way to prevent frizz. By the way, if you're finding this video helpful so far and you love these side-by-side tests, be sure to hit subscribe. It's totally free. The button's down below for that. Now it's time to diffuse, and I'm using my Curlsmith Diffusion hair dryer. I'm doing the same settings on each side, but I'm switching up the way in which I diffuse. I usually do scrunch my hair with my diffuser, but there are some important tweaks to make so that way you don't get frizz when you're scrunching your hair with your diffuser. If you are directing the hair straight up, so if you're holding your diffuser pointed up at the ceiling, it is going to create frizz because you are blowing the hair up the hair shaft and that's creating frizz. Or if you're moving too rapidly and just scrunching quickly with your diffuser, that will definitely contribute to frizz. I also see this a lot when people diffuse upside down. They just keep the diffuser pointed straight up instead of turning the diffuser to point towards your scalp. That is key. You want the diffuser prongs pointed towards your scalp, not straight up. You can see how much frizz is already forming while I'm diffusing. Another common mistake is touching your hair constantly as you are diffusing or even scrunching your hair. I know a lot of people do this to try and see if their hair is dry and they're trying to fix their hair as it's diffusing, but it's best to just leave your hair alone and not touch it while it's diffusing. Anytime your hair is in this middle ground state where it's partially dry, partially wet, that's when you can really get frizz if you start touching it too much, so avoid touching it. Sometimes I will scrunch my hair at the end once it's completely dry as I diffuse to try and break the cast. That is a tip I've shared in the past, but at that point my hair is pretty much all the way dry. For diffusing on the side that I didn't scrunch, I am still using the diffuser to shrink up the curls, which still is a form of scrunching, but I'm not going crazy with it, and I'm also keeping the diffuser prongs pointed towards my scalp, so that way it blows the frizz inward instead of straight up. The diffuser placement is key here. I also like using the prongs of my diffuser around the mid-shaft area or up at the root to help get some root lift and volume. And I did that method on both sides. You can see the difference when I'm upside down on this side, where I still gather the hair in the scrunch position, but the diffuser head is pointed towards my scalp, not straight up in the air. Now that my hair is dry, you can already see a difference, but let's let this cast set before I scrunch it out. If you need more help with your diffusing techniques, you can check out a video I did recently all about the most common diffusing mistakes and how to fix them. The next step is to scrunch out the crunch. I usually wait and do this until my hair is dry. I also let my hair set for a bit before I do this, but the improper way to scrunch out the cast would be to scrunch aggressively or too quickly or pull at your hair. Those same methods that I've been talking about, that same motion with the hair, is really going to create a lot of frizz, especially if you're going in on the surface of your hair. If you break the cast too early and it's still wet, you also get frizz, and if your hands are sticky with hair products, that will also cause frizz when you're breaking your cast. So a better way to break your cast is to fluff your hair from underneath. I always do this to help get some more root lift, but I'm keeping all of the friction underneath the hair so that way the top layer doesn't get as much friction. And when I do scrunch out the cast, I do the same motion that I've been talking about previously, where you're just gently cupping the hair from the ends and scrunching up to the root gently and slowly. The only time you will see me scrunching a little bit more is if I have a extreme hold gel in my hair. So something that gave me a really hard cast, you can go to town more with scrunching it out in that case. But if you're using a softer hold gel or a buildable hold gel like this one, you're definitely going to need to be gentle when breaking your cast. Also, a lot of my casts broke naturally as I was letting my hair sit. That's really common with these softer type of gels. Another technique you can try to break your cast without messing up your hair too much is just gently running your fingers down the hair strands. Now make sure that your hands again are clean and dry when you do this, but this can gradually break up the cast without really roughing up your hair's cuticle. Breaking the cast really just involves touching your hair and having some friction on there to break it. It doesn't necessarily mean you're roughing up your hair. So here are my final results. What do you all think? I can clearly see a difference. I have so much more frizz, especially along the surface of my hair and the middle layers through here and on top. Compared to this side, I just have normal frizz. Now the hair is never going to be completely frizz-free. We all have natural frizz, especially when I use gels that do have a little bit of a softer feel to them. Like this one, you're definitely going to have a little bit of frizz. Now it's definitely just the normal amount of frizz, like a little bit of fuzziness throughout. It's not near as frizzy as this side. Now, the more frizz on this side is creating more volume right here, but I still feel like I have great volume here on this side. I was worried that the side that I didn't really scrunch wouldn't really bounce up and be as voluminous, but it looks about the same in terms of shrinkage. And that's really the point of scrunching, right? We're trying to get our curls to shrink up and to form their shape and also to create volume. But this just goes to show that you can still do that without actually scrunching. Personally, I think that the tightness of your curl and your volume has more to do with the way that you diffuse. Like my hair could be more stretched out when I'm styling and it's wet, but once I set it in that scrunch position with my diffuser, that's what's really setting the curl shape. It sets the hydrogen bonds in your hair, which form the shape. So it really comes down to your diffusing technique. And I also think styling technique is important too, because when you style with tension and you help to clump and define the curls, that's what's going to create that curl shrinkage in your hair, as opposed to the hair being a little bit more stretched out and more separated. That's going to naturally dry a little bit frizzier and not as bouncy. So I think the techniques that I typically use to style and diffuse are why I still have a good shape and good definition and clumping to this side, and it's not super elongated. Now, if you have loose curls and waves, I totally understand why you really need scrunching or something to get your hair to bounce up, but I would challenge you to try not scrunching as much while it's wet and just focus your efforts on your diffusing routine with proper diffusing scrunching and see if that makes a difference. You can also try some of those alternative methods that I mentioned, like kind of shaking the curls or bouncing them, just any sort of movement to help them start to spring up after you've applied that tension. Because I know a lot of you are thinking, well, you talk so much about smoothing the hair, my hair just straightens out. I hear that so much from clients. That really comes down to you needing to improve the health of your hair if it's not bouncing up, and then you need to find ways to get it to start to bounce up by alleviating some of that weight. So like I mentioned, microplopping, that's one of the best ways to alleviate some of that water weight in your hair without causing a ton of frizz, as long as you do it properly. But my goal with this was really just to challenge that default styling technique that we all do. Like I said, it's really muscle memory to where we just want to scrunch. It's what we all do to apply our products, but it could be one of those root causes of your frizz, and I challenge you to try something different and really pay attention. I feel like that's one of my biggest takeaways with this is when you pay attention to how your hair is behaving when you are touching it and when you're styling, you will really see the impact of the way that you're styling your hair and the way you're touching it and holding it once you start really paying attention. So that's why I always recommend standing in front of a mirror and really looking at your hair as you were styling instead of being more haphazard with it and not really paying attention. That's where a lot of frizz and wonky shape curls come in. If you ever feel like you do everything right, but you're still getting frizz, scrunching could be that missing piece of the puzzle. If you decide to try not scrunching, I would love for you to tell me in the comments how that goes for you. Do you notice a difference? Did this help you out? And if you're still getting frizz, no matter what you try, even without scrunching, there could be another root cause. I would love to help you get to the bottom of it. That's something that I can help you do through my curl coaching program, which is officially opening for enrollment the beginning of September, and you can join the waitlist down below. But we will get to work together over the span of 3 months, so I'll get to really learn about your hair and help you diagnose the cause of your frizz. I also help my clients get so much more longevity, saving them time, money, and frustration on their curly hair. So I would love to have you for our next program so we can get to the root cause of your curl issues. If you enjoyed this side-by-side and would like to see more videos like it, then I definitely recommend checking out my recent diffusing mistakes video. There are so many other common causes of frizz and wonky curls that I didn't even touch on in this video that come into play when you're diffusing. I also share ways to get more volume and shape out of your curls and how a lot of people are often diffusing incorrectly, which is why they're not liking their diffused results. So I will have that video linked right here on the screen, and I'll talk to you over there. Bye, everyone.